Elise, thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining me. You do not know how excited I am to have you today. Today, welcome to the Maximum Mom podcast. And today I have Eve Rodsky. I feel like I'm kind of like interviewing a famous person. She is an amazing author of Fair Play, which is really one of my favorite books I have read in such a long time. Eve, welcome.
Oh my gosh. Well, Elise, you and I got to have a little before talk, and why I wanted to be here was because you are the epitome of what I write about in Fair Play. And what I mean by that is a journey through the shock and the awe of what it looks like to have to think having it all means doing it all, to raising six kids, to having a blended family, to encouraging independence, to recognizing that adulting is not gendered, to recognizing that doing your laundry can and housework for men is an important message, all the way to recognizing the importance of unicorn space, the active pursuit of what makes it you, which you've done and you encourage in your kids. So that's my 20 seconds about Elise that has made me so excited to have you in my life as a spiritual friend that we met on social media, but also because I think so much of your life experience mirrors so much of the interviews I had for the book, and it made me really happy to connect with you.
Oh, yeah, I am so glad. I really want to dig into those interviews. I mean, those of you who might not know Eve, I mean, first, you really just should. I mean, you just need to get to know her. I mean, she's a Harvard law grad, so she totally understands our, lawyer brains and the lawyer side of things. But I mean, she has done so much for, I mean, just I want to say women, but I mean, it's so beyond women. It's just parents and families and couples and people in the world in bringing about fair play. So I really want to dive in. I mean, Eve, how would you describe fair play to, well, I guess first I shouldn't treat you like anybody else. I always need to know what makes you a mom. Like
Oh,
what
I love
who's
it.
at your in your family? Tell us about your
I love
family.
that. I love family structure questions because I think it's really important. I was speaking to this beautiful woman who wrote a book called How to Raise a Feminist Son. And, and she said that, even just talking about what a different family structures look like is very powerful, since we have a very, uh, you know, typical one in our mind often of a hetero cisgender couple with two and a half kids and a dog in the yard. It often does not look like that. I grew up in a family structure of a single mother. It was me and my autistic brother and my mother, even though nobody knew he was autistic, because as we know, for single mothers, it is a lot to hold all the cards. That's the fair play metaphor.
Yep.
For all the uh, domestic childcare and housework, plus trying to make a living is not easy. So we see you single parents. And my family structure now is I am a Syrian Jewish identified woman of immigrants who lives with a hetero cisgender man, Seth Rodsky, my husband. We have three kids, and we are currently residing in Los Angeles, even though I grew up in New York City. So what makes me a mother is, I think birthing a book, of course, but also being responsible for three humans. One was a toddler in the pandemic, and I do not recommend that. Do not recommend raising a toddler in a pandemic to anybody out there ever again. And my son Zach is 12, my son Ben is 9, and Anna is 4.
That is awesome. Wow. You do have your hands full though. I mean, you're in like full bore mom mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big
I
time.
will say that at least I've done hard things. I was a parental child, as a psychologist would call me. I helped my mother with eviction notices, late utility bills. Um, I had to reconnect with my father in a parental child role. I had to help set up SSD for my autistic brother. I've had to get through law school, take 2 bars, pay all my loans off. But I will say nothing, I don't think anything's been jump out of a plane. That's for another podcast. But um, all those things have not been as hard as raising a toddler in a pandemic. And I have the privilege, obviously, of having a partner who is now a fair play partner. So I think the PTSD we don't even have any idea of what we're going to see in the next
No.
couple of years for how
Yeah.
women's mental health and physical health will have been affected for what we just went through.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think that a lot more is going to need to be done to really look into that. I mean, that is almost its own separate podcast. I mean, I've
Mhm.
worried so much. I'm on the other spectrum, having a child who's going off to college. So I've been raising a junior and senior in the
That's
pandemic,
hard too.
whose life got really changed. And, me having to really flip my own mindset of, his grades have become completely immaterial to me, in the sense of,
Totally. He's
you
alive.
know, ex-
Yeah, he's engaged in the world.
exactly.
Yeah.
I was all about engaged and truly content, looking at his mental health, making sure that he was content. And so,
Mhm.
that looked
Mhm.
different for our family, I'm sure, than other families, and everyone has had to handle it their own
Absolutely.
way. But when I've been working with parents in my work and they're all worked up about their kids' homework and worksheets and what, I'm like, could you throw those worksheets away? Like, this is
I'll go
not,
further, Elise. I'll say let's literally burn them with a match.
yeah, big
Burn
time.
them. Like,
I
and we'll
mean,
do it safely so you don't burn your house down. Yes.
so true though. It is so true. Well, let's talk about fair play and the division of labor. And why did you write Fair Play? Tell us about it.
I'm just laughing because it reminded me a lot of what you said earlier. And I'd love for you to tell your audience about what you said about your first husband and his view of your time. But um, I chose to write Fair Play. And, I write about this in the book, even though I don't get to unpack it as deeply as I'd like to. So I could do that here for a couple minutes. But it really was, you can't make this stuff up. It started with a text that sent me. Just one, random day. His text said, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." And I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries. Apparently launched an entire new career in my life as a political activist. So I always say thank you, Seth, for thinking I was the fulfiller of your smoothie needs back then. But that was that day that Seth sent me on the surprise you didn't get blueberries text. It actually felt a lot like the pandemic. So that's why I
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
unpack it. It was a day that after my second son was born. So this was 2011. So
Mhm.
it was my daughter was already, sorry, my son Zach was already back in his toddler transition program. So it was sometime in the fall. And I still had a scar that was, pussing and healing from my second C-section. I had a diaper bag in the passenger seat of my car, a breast pump in the passenger seat of my car. Ben was home with our nanny at the time, or a babysitter. I can't remember if we had a nanny yet.
Right.
And then uh, I had the gifts for the newborn baby to return in the backseat of my car. I had started my own firm because I had opted out of the traditional workforce.
Right.
I say forced out now because language matters, but back then I thought I was really making a choice
Right.
for flexibility. So I had a pen in between my legs because I still mark up everything analog. I don't know how you do things, but I would hit the stop sign because I was in the car because I was racing to get my older son Zach at his toddler transition program. And in America, those last 7 minutes because we really value childcare. Anyway, so every time I would hit the brakes, this pen would sort of stab me in the vagina. And that sort of became my metaphor for that day, just being stabbed in the vagina by a pen. And then Seth sends me this text, I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries in the midst of being stabbed in the vagina with a pen. And I was done. At least I was done. I said, you know what? I pulled over. I was like, I'm going to be late to pick up Zach. We don't take traffic lightly in Los Angeles. We don't pull over often, but I couldn't drive. I mean, I was already texting and driving. I was like, I'm going to literally drive this car into a ditch. So I just sat there sobbing, thinking that I did not have the career marriage combo I thought I was going to have. Um,
Right.
and more importantly, how would I become the default? I call him fair play the she fault because this is a problem that affects women. Um,
Absolutely.
I was holding 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family at that time, and working outside the home. And that's a statistic that I was undeniably living, but I didn't know at the time that that is our statistic in America. Women
Right.
hold 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, regardless of whether we work outside the home. And so that was it. That put me on a journey of saying,
Wow.
I'm not going to live like this anymore. And I needed to understand before I could change anything what was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the last 10 years was. It was a awakening, a political awakening, because private lives are public issues.
Right.
And the more we think things are private and it's just our problem or our fault, then we don't change things.
Right.
And so it was my understanding and awakening to the fact that society has been built on the backs of the unpaid labor of women. That's
Mm-hmm.
been it's not inevitable. It's actually freaking inevitable. And sort of my quest to change it partnership by partnership.
I mean, it's so powerful. I mean, I have goosebumps listening. I cannot even imagine, but I can. This drive and getting that text about the blueberries, I mean, would be game changing as you're dealing with that.
Yeah, it still brings up tears sometimes because
Oh,
it was
yeah.
I think what it comes down to is it's the bigger it was a bigger assumption. And that's, why Fair Play, again, like I say, is a political movement. It started off as a self-help book because, it couldn't be a political movement in the way that I needed to tell my story, because my own unwinding of this did not start as a political movement. It started with deep-seated resentment
Yeah.
towards my partner, that made me want to leave my marriage, because the only people I saw who were empowered to have men do childcare and housework were my friends who were divorced,
Right.
because they were forced to do it. Right. And
True.
so I
Yeah.
kept thinking, this is a terrible family structure idea, because we're already disempowered in family law, in
Right.
divorce. And so we're going to end up with like less financially empowered women. And the only way
More
to get
work.
men to do is more work. And so my idea was, let me, of course, some people do have to leave their marriages to get that domestic fairness. But
Absolutely.
for me, it was trying to understand if I could try to bring equality into a marriage, equity, not even equality, just
Right.
some unloading of my encumbered mind, then I would at least be doing a service. And so that's what it started off as. It started off as the shit I do spreadsheet,
Totally.
um, which is every type A woman starts with a list.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
then after 9 months of crowdsourcing that, with women like you, Elise, who said to me things like, Eve, you forgot Elf on the Shelf. And I'd say, okay, well, I'm a Jew. So yeah, I may have forgotten that. But actually, no. If you go to tab 72, you obviously don't know how to use Excel. Scroll to 72. If you go to tab called Magical Beings, that's tab 72. Scroll down. You got to scroll because you don't know how to use Excel. Underneath Santa, you will see Elf on the Shelf. It's in there.
Absolutely.
So it was that granular. I
Oh,
finally sent it off to Seth 9 months later, 17, million megabyte spreadsheet. And I didn't even get a word response. I just got the monkey that was covering its eyes, the
right.
monkey.
The emoji.
Yeah, that was it. See no evil. So I think that was a day, at least, I recognized that I had a choice to either resign myself to doing it all, leave my marriage, or get my ass in gear and become my own client. And I think that's why we're talking, because we're both lawyers.
Yep.
My specialty is organizational management. I work for families that look like the HBO show Succession, and your audience should feel bad for me. But what I do for those families is I bring not just philanthropic advising, but I bring legal structure and succession structure and governance structure, to their most complex organizational decisions. And that was it. That was my journey to say, when I got my ass in gear to become my own client, I realized if I asked one question, it could change the world. And that
Totally.
question was, what if we treated our homes
Right.
as our most important organizations? That was the question.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so critical. I find it fascinating. Obviously, I didn't have the spreadsheet you did, but with my current husband, who is an amazing partner, I am not at all saying otherwise because he's phenomenal. But even at the beginning, I asked him if we could go sit at Starbucks, and I wrote a list in my notes section of my phone of everything that I had thought about that needed planning over the last 7 days. It had hundreds of items on it. So I brought it to him and I was like, you do so many things, but you're always at that execution part,
Yep.
but not at the beginning of the conception and the planning and the,
Yep.
kind of like gathering resources, all that. Yet his strength professionally is he's a project manager. And
Oh
I
my
was
God,
like,
right. That's conception. You're paid to plan.
I'm like,
You're paid
dude,
to plan.
this is your jam. Like you're in your flow here. So we literally sat down at Starbucks and went through this whole list. And I was like, we've got to divvy this up in a way that makes sense for our strengths. Because I mean, there's some serious stuff I suck at. So I should not be doing it. Let's be serious. And there's some other stuff that he's not so great at that I should be doing. And so, but when I read your book, I mean, talk to us about that whole idea of ownership of the process.
Yes, well, you just said it so beautifully. That's why I said that's why I was so excited to meet you, because you were like living fair play in real time. And by the way, you have 6 kids to show that it works, and it took a second marriage to get there. I get it. But this handbook of positive organizational scholarship is just one of the reasons I lift that up, to show that it wasn't like I had an idea and I was like, this has never been tested before, right? The idea of organizational management, a lot of business schools are actually called schools of management. I mean, we are actually taught and paid for the conception and planning phase. Actually, the execution phase is not one that we often value as much in our culture. But what was happening was, in the domestic sphere, because we don't treat our homes as our most important organizations, I was able to see, when I reframed it that way, it took a lot of the gendered anger out, even though I do bring that back in the beginning of fair play. But the system itself is really a system that can work for any family structure. I've tested it with roommates. I have beta testers that are in polyamorous relationships. But it's a very simple concept of an ownership mindset. And it's like saying don't eat sugar, though it is definitely much easier said than done. But the idea was, I kept thinking, well, what if we treated our homes as our most important organization? I know how it wouldn't look. It wouldn't look like deciding who's taking the dog out right when it's about to take a piss on the rug. It wouldn't look like setting the table when we're already hangry and cranky, right? It wouldn't look like the dying and decision fatigue that so many of us do. And so what it would look like is an answer I got from my second most favorite question I've ever asked in the past 10 years in 17 countries. And that was, how did mustard get into your refrigerator? My favorite question. Literally,
it's so
because
important.
You can take condiments from any culture and sub them out. You can talk to any family about it, but let's center the hetero cisgender family now. I'm talking to women married to men, because again, that's where the problem is. And it's where a lot of our decision making are 70% of the 1% of men who make our decisions have stay-at-home wives, the most traditional family structure imaginable. So that's why I'm centering men and women here. And even though the system, like I said, is celebrating all family structures, but in a typical hetero cisgender relationship, what I would hear in 17 countries, and at this point, thousands of data points, was mustard gets in the refrigerator because me, the woman, knows my second son, Johnny, likes French's yellow mustard, only that kind, on his protein. Otherwise, he literally won't eat protein. And when I go to the pediatrician, they're going to shame me because my child doesn't eat protein. Okay. I wrote that down saying, I know that. So the thinking and conceiving, that conception is something that's a project management phase. Okay. So I would write that down. And then I would hear, oh yeah. And then I get stakeholder buy-in from my family for what they need from the grocery list. I mean, I didn't actually hear the word stakeholder buy-in, but that's what I was listening for. I monitor the mustard for when it's running low. So again, that was a phase of planning that is typical in the workplace. And then I would finally hear, oh yeah, and then my husband, he goes to the store to get the groceries and the yellow mustard, but he brings home spicy Dijon every freaking time. And Eve, you want me to do this ownership mindset and trust my husband with my living will. Well, the dude can't even bring home the right type of mustard. So then I was stuck, Elise. I was stuck, right? Because, all right, nobody wants to do an ownership mindset because, partner can't even bring them home the right type of mustard. So
Right.
unpacking all of that as a classic systems failure, which I see in my more complex families, was
Mhm.
something I was able to do easily because I have 10 years of practice working in family organizational structure. And so, ironically, that career ended up helping me with developing this system.
Yeah.
And what I recognized was that if I could break up a system where there's onboarding, and of course, it's not just like a list, like you get the mustard, but really a thorough onboarding of a system where when you own a card, when you own a task, a gamified system, because fair play is a game,
Mhm.
that when you own the card, you do it with full conception, planning, and execution. You're not going to get it right at first, but at least the idea of it
Right.
meant that you're not blaming your partner. And it became like the light bulb moment in our household where everything started to change, Elise, everything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is so transformational. I mean, I went from being married
Yeah.
for 18 years to somebody who had that mindset of, because at the time I was a stay-at-home mom for much of that relationship, was, his time was worth money, my time was not. And I completely agreed with that. I mean, I
Same,
bought into that
same,
hook, line, and sinker and felt like I needed to do everything
everything.
and he earned the money. So that was completely fair in my mind. And
Same,
after,
same.
a solid decade or so of that, I was like, whoa, this is intensely not the way I meant my life to go.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so,
absolutely.
and
That
we
was it.
really, yeah, we had a
I had the
hard
same
time
thing.
being able to unwind that in any way. Cause, once I did go back to work, it was still hard to get over that, well, my time is still more valuable than your time. And
Because
I was like,
your job is more flexible and you make less, right? Well, ta-da! Women always make less, so that means I'm going to be holding every single fair play card for
exactly.
the rest of my life because of societal inequity. It didn't make sense, Elise.
It
It didn't make
it
sense.
doesn't. No,
We
it
are we
doesn't.
are a family unit. We are here to raise these, children together or your dogs together. And it was um it was this gendered idea around my time, which is why I chose to write to women, because I really, at least the game, if if there was no shit, societal mud and shit we had to go through, then this
Right,
would just be sitting on the shelves of the Cards Against Humanity, right? Because
right.
it should be very easy to say, hey, you take these and I take these, but it's not like that. It's
Not at
not like
all.
that. And it's why I chose to write to women and why Fair Play had to be a book and
Yep.
not just the cards. The cards actually, we purposely didn't put them out for a whole year because we were afraid, as some people still do, right? That people were going to use them as just a list, like you take laundry, and like throw it at their partner, right? It's not
Right.
meant, this is meant to be a conversational tool.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what the book was intended to do was to spend the first half unpacking what I call these toxic time messages for why it is that women believe their time is sand and infinite,
Yep.
and men's time is finite and like diamonds. And that took, it's very triggering. It's obviously something we can't unpack in just one episode, but I will say, you could read the book and come join me and Elise on our social channels.
Right.
Um, but it really was, for me, the hardest one was, two were the hardest. One was convincing myself that I deserved a voice, even
Yep.
though Seth made more money than me. By the way, now I always say to him, you deserve a voice because yes, you make more money than me, but my job is way more valuable. Like I was helping, I still to this day, I still have clients. I help them give their money away in the world. Like I structure their giving. Like that's more valuable than, your private equity investments. But I didn't see it that way. Of course, I didn't even think I could use my voice at
Right.
all to ask Seth to help because he made more money than me in the beginning of our relationship. And the other one that was really hard for me to unpack was believing I was a better multitasker.
Oh,
I really truly believe that I was wired differently for care, and then I had to unpack that with
yeah.
a neuroscientist who, of course, told me there's no gendered difference in how men and women multitask, but even more importantly, he joked with me and said, well, look what we men have done to you, women. We've convinced you that you're better
Completely.
at wiping asses and doing dishes.
Right.
How great for my leisure time and my tenure. And he was joking, but at least when he said that, I started to cry in his office.
Oh, yeah.
It was so triggering to
It's,
unpack these issues.
oh, well, it's so interesting to me. I mean, listening to you, the thing that my ex-husband will say and has always said the whole time we were married and post-marriage, how capable I am. And he'll tell the children, your mother is so capable. And I think in his heart, in many ways, he means it positively. It is so triggering to me because
Yeah.
it was the thing that I always felt like, well, this is his way of being like, well, she can do this, but somehow he couldn't. And somehow, because he would get stressed by something and I was able to handle the stress, I should be the one doing it. So I would just take on more and more and more caretaking roles. I mean, I won't bore you with all the people I have caretake for in my family. And it was all based on this. I was so capable.
By the
That
way, it's never boring. It will never be boring for me to hear who you caretake for your family, because the value of care is the political movement.
it is.
That is it is our legacy. It is what we have to demand that men do for us to
Yep.
get a fair shake in this Earth 2.0. I mean, if we learn anything about the pandemic,
Right.
can we learn that an hour holding our children's hand at the pediatrician's office is just as valuable as the hour in the boardroom? That's what
Well,
I'm
and
hoping.
the hour sitting by your child on Zoom, trying to help them stay focused in school. I mean, and we see so many women who have left the workforce because of the pandemic, which is just so painful to me on so many levels. Um, I mean, just so many levels. As a business owner, I mean, I feel so strongly around the issue of flexibility and providing a working environment that works for women's actual real lives. That's not based in some kind of weird utopian existence that is not an existence. And when I see how many women have left the workforce because of employers that are not and have not been flexible about moms mostly who have been educating these children for 15 months, I literally want to like scream and poke people's eyeballs out.
Absolutely. And I want to say to employers, if you're listening, or leaders, hold your fucking horses. I mean, I'm seeing, it's
Yeah.
crazy. The eagerness to just jump back into the way things were,
Oh,
you're returning to office on July 1, the not communicating with employees, to passive aggressive communication. It is ironically the same communication I caution against in fair play, which is, passive aggressive. The Washingtonian CEO, who's a woman, she wrote a op-ed about her employees coming back to the office. She never even spoke directly to them. We're just
right.
not used to having difficult conversations, Elise. And I
Not
think
at all.
that,
Not at
honestly, the systems part of the fair play, right? The idea that when Seth heard, oh, of course, if I'm in charge of extracurricular sports, I can't believe I've been saying that, by getting them to the little league field and not recognizing that you're serving the kids for what friends they want to play with. You've been researching leagues. You've been
right.
Xeroxing 5 copies of their birth certificate to hand to me. You've been on an 85-person text chain to get them to practice. And you're arranging a coach's gift and like a after season party. Like, whoa. Like when you realize that that was all included in owning the extracurricular sports card, not only did I get 6 hours a week, my week back, but he started to get an understanding of why it was so hard to even
Completely.
get there,
Yeah.
which is that we were both in this bizarre gendered understanding of time, that it wasn't 24 hours, that somehow time was money, and his was more important than mine. His was diamonds. We were both guarding it. Mine was infinite and sand, and I was capable, like you said, just
Right.
handling everything else, unpaid labor. And then, of course, we both stopped communicating,
Yeah.
which I think so many people do. And then so much of what I started to say to myself was, well, in the time it would even take me to bring this up or tell Seth what to do, I should just do this myself. And that became the worst and most
That's
toxic of the toxic
absolutely.
time messages.
That is, I mean, I have to tell you, like, I preach this constantly. I mean, I love to delegate like none other. And even in my team, at home, in my family, I mean, I think learning to delegate smartly and
Mhm.
learning how to delegate well, and your system allows people to see all three of the steps: the conception, the
That's
planning, and
right.
the
And it's a
execution.
game. If you don't know how to delegate, I say just, it's a game. Hand over a
Exactly.
card. That's how you
Exactly.
delegate. You say, we're going to experiment. You'll hold the
Yeah.
laundry card for a week. And, my son, Ben, I'll tell you something funny because if a 9-year-old, I will say to your audience, if a 9-year-old can get this, then anybody can. He was looking at the laundry card because that's his. On the weekends, he's responsible for laundry, for everybody's laundry. And he said to me, he saw my friend, we were scrolling through Instagram or something, and he saw my friend was saying her daughter was helping her fold laundry. And Ben said to me, well, that's a terrible idea, mom, because A, the daughter's going to feel nagged. B, she's just helping out. Why
Right.
doesn't the daughter just do from the
Do it
secret
all.
oils? That's what he calls the Downy and the Tide, the secret
Mhm.
oils, all the way to setting a timer from when the wash is up because you always forget, and then having to put it in the dryer. And then mom, you have to set another timer because you have to take it out and then you have to clean that lint. Oh, that's my favorite part because it feels good to take the lint out. And then you have to fold all the clothes. And he went on YouTube and learned a new folding techniques. There's actually a new folding technique
No
where you can
way.
just like pinch a shirt and it just folds. I don't know, super cool. So he
Oh
learned
my
that.
gosh, I need that.
And then he said to me, the only thing I don't like to fold or touch is I don't really like to touch your underwear. So I said, you know what, Ben, you don't have to do my underwear. I'm
Totally.
glad you're doing everybody else's laundry, but I'll save my underwear in a pile and I'll do it myself.
Right.
And
Fair
that's
enough.
how that is. If a 9-year-old can get that concept of ownership, then anybody can.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And learning to delegate well and be willing to experiment. And I know you and I talked about the whole idea of mistakes. I mean, we've had many laundry mistakes in our family. My children start laundry at 8 and I don't touch it after that. Like, I've been a hands-off laundry mom. We have had many a load turn pink. And I'm like, my
Mhm.
boys look lovely in pink at
Yeah,
football
I love
practice.
it.
I'm like, it's kind of cute on you with your red hair. And so it, but they
Yeah, the
learn.
one thing I hate, the laundry mistake I will say I hate is when tissues are left in pockets. Oh my
Oh,
God. One time Ben had to clean out like with a tweezer, like everyone, like tissue ball. And I was like,
oh
this.
yeah,
But I still said to my kids, like, you have serious privilege that you're doing it at home, right? I mean, I didn't
totally.
grow up with laundry in my house. I mean, that's
Right.
amazing. And so they understand the privilege of that. And um, I actually got to go take them back to the Lower East Side and show them the
Oh,
laundromat because this is too much laundry information, but and the reason why I'm doing this is actually because part of the exercise I tell couples if they're stuck is instead of starting with even building your deck together or who does what, step back and just play
oh,
with the cards and
mhm.
just use them as a conversation prompt for storytelling. So, for example, my laundry story I'll tell you is that I got maced really early because actually a girl was assaulted in my laundry room where I grew up.
Wow.
So I ended up using a public laundromat that we had across the street. And, we got one of those carts and we would
Hmm.
take it there because I was too scared to use the laundromat in my building. And
Right.
so laundry has a lot of triggers for me. It has a lot of storytelling
Mhm.
in me. It has a lot of female vulnerability in me.
Right.
I'm doing it from my mom really young. So there's a lot of beauty because you can get, you think your partner knows so many things about you, but they may not, who fixed the sinks in your home growing up? You just by asking that question, you can learn so much. Did you host parties when you were growing up? You get
Right.
so much information about your partner that, we don't really practice having those
No.
types of deep communication.
Oh, I think that's an amazing idea. I mean, you've given me an idea
Fun.
because I've bought your book and cards for all of our young adult children. And what a great way for them to have conversations with their partners who they're partnered up with now, in that stage before maybe they're deciding to marry or not, or whatever they're going to do. I think that's such an
Just
amazing
do, yeah, like
opportunity.
let you know, do it over cocktails, bring them home and say,
Yeah,
we're gonna play like the game. Like, tell me about groceries going up. Where did you, I mean, it's so
totally.
fun. Like I would, if you asked me that question, Elise, I would say, you know what, my mom and my brother, that's some of my favorite memories because
Yeah.
we'd go to Pathmark together on the Lower East Side. And I remember it was always freezing in that Pathmark and it was always cold outside. And so I was never the one picking the vegetables or the outside stuff. I always went to the interior. And that was fun for me because I got to pick one brand name cereal. So I'd always pick Count Chocula, or like Cocoa Puffs with the,
Yeah.
that weird bird on the front of it. And so I remember that I was like too cold for the aisle. So I'd go to the middle and I have these fond memories of my sugar cereal that I still eat till today. But again, like I want to know things about you. I want to know things about my partner, or they can learn things about their boyfriend, their
Yeah.
polyamorous friends, or whatever they're dating, whoever
Right.
they're dating. You get to tell stories.
I just think that's amazing. Well, and it's interesting you bring up grocery store
Yeah, tell me a
memories.
story. Do you have a memory of groceries?
Oh, completely. Well, it's with my own children. I used to homeschool my children before I was married. So when I just had my 4 children at home, we were Hurricane Katrina, so we had to evacuate. It's a long story,
Oh
but so
wow.
I was homeschooling my 4 children, and one of the ways I taught them math was by we would have a grocery list and I would split it in fours, and one older child would have to go with a younger child and they would have to get these things on each of the child's list, but they each had a budget at the top. So then they'd have to figure out the cost of
Wow.
their things with their budget. And then whoever was cooking would, be involved in, well, how much do we need to make for cooking? There was a lot of math that went into our
Wow.
grocery
Wow.
shopping. And it was such a fun time watching them all. That we'd get to the Target and they'd all go out on their little ways at the super Target doing their things. And it was, yeah, it was pretty amazing to see. Homeschooling my children helped me to understand just how competent kids really are.
Yeah.
And so it was very eye-opening when you talk about Ben being able to do that laundry, and that means your husband too could do the laundry, or any husband could do the
Yep.
laundry. It
Yep.
was so eye-opening to me because I was like, I've got these children that are competent little beings. And I was like, why am I doing all the things? And it was very helpful to me. And that's, I mean, if your book and cards were available in my time as, early on, it would have been game changing as far as not being so resentful and angry. I mean, just opening up and having those conversations rather than from a place of resentment and anger, but from a place of, let's do this better. Like, let's make
Together.
this
Mhm.
work together so that we can together raise the children. I mean, because fundamentally, and this is a thing that I find really sad, because in our family, I did do all the things. I also became the parent that was so close to my
Right.
children. And
Right.
I think because of that, my ex, who probably had many, many wonderful things to offer the children, really didn't have the opportunity because the relationship wasn't there, because of this different gendered way we dealt with things. And it's really sad. And I mean, it's sad even to this date.
It's sad.
And
Well, I say like fair play is a love letter to men
it
because
is.
nobody wants to live like this. I mean,
No.
I think we get into these things by default because
Right.
we instead of having these types of conversations, look, we had to invest. We have to invest time in hearing about, your beautiful grocery stories or mine. You have to invest in conversations,
Right.
and we don't invest in conversations. We don't believe it's a practice. We treat communication as a means to an end. I talk about this a lot in my mediation practice, that the idea of communication as a practice um, is not typical.
Right.
And so the more we can look at it as we're just practicing, it doesn't have to be perfect. We can walk away. It gets better, but like you said, but we have to get to that table. We have to get rid of the assumptions, and so often the assumptions of gender or money in same-sex couples end up taking the place of actual conversations of who wants to do what. And so, and then it becomes, well, I can never ask them because they have this other more important role.
Right.
And I will say that the men, the men that are the primary breadwinners in their families that are also beta testers for fair play are the ones I feel closest to,
Oh, yeah.
because the transformation that they are seeing in terms of what connections and space and role they can have in their home, and recognizing that it doesn't diminish their ability to make money or be a capable leader. In fact, my husband will tell you
It
he
increased.
believes he is double, triple, quadruply more successful the more he's invested in our kids and fair play.
100%. Yep.
And it's because he has things to talk about to his colleagues. He can be a
Yep.
deeper person. He can thread deeper with people. He has stories. He has humanity.
Oh, I
And
mean, to
I mean, humanity is
absolutely.
everything,
It's
I think.
it's all. I mean,
That's like, what else do we
it,
have? We're not
what
robots.
else do we have? And what else do we actually care about? I mean, to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's everything. And I mean, what a value and what an amazing just power your husband's newfound stories and humanity will bring to your children. I
Well,
mean,
that's the beauty. I think for us, it's been the success of recognizing that, looking at other women around me who were super successful. And I had my friend who said to me, you know what, Eve, I was really okay doing it all. But I think what I've recognized from your book is I'm not okay having my daughters watch me do it all.
exactly.
And so I will say, for people out there who feel maybe a little bit more, and Miles, I'm almost ready. I'm actually in the process of upgrading all my iPads and technologies to talk about IT. But I will say that for me, the legacy of recognizing, like you said, that adulting is not gendered. I said to you, Elise, because you are a role model of raising competent children who understand what it means to bring that competence to the next generation. And the competence is not just for your daughters; your
Mm,
sons are just equally as competent. Um, is that, to me, the reimagining of home economics, the
totally.
teaching the rest of our institutions, that the value of care, the value of these other unpaid invisible tasks are actually the core of who you become as a human. And that's
Completely.
why I ask people to tell those stories, because
Right.
I'm telling you, if you start thinking back to the stories about your grocery shopping at Pathmark, or your kids retell the story of what grocery shopping was like for you as a math lesson, or you hear a man pulled the grooming card out of the deck, and we were on a panel, and he told me about learning to shave,
Right.
and
Yeah,
how it was really stressful for him because he didn't have a father, and he was trying
totally.
to figure out, who should he just get an electric shaver, or should he ask a man in his family to actually teach him to use a blade. I mean, this is where you get your stories and your
It's
personality.
it's huge. I mean, it's so I'll never forget a time when one of my children literally just asked, that one of the sex questions, just middle of this group, and wants to know this. And at the time, he really couldn't have gone to his dad about that. Like, that just wasn't the right thing. And I just remember watching him look around and be like, who is actually going to answer this? And obviously I stepped up to answer, yet as did his older brother. And it was fascinating because I thought, imagine all the things that these children are missing out on, some really basic things, simply because my ex valued his time based on hours and based on money, and my time was valued differently, and it truly impacted the relationships.
And by the way, I think what we've also learned, corporations, I'm talking to you now, is, this again, fair play is a political movement. I call it, it's fair play, which is obviously what we're talking about here, which is um, inviting men into their full power of
Yeah.
competence in invisible, unpaid labor and childcare and housework. But the fair day and um, fair play, fair day, and fair, what did I say? The other one is fair play, fair pay. So fair pay and fair day are really important because they're also interrelated here, in that a fair day to me is a 6-hour work day, or a 4 day work week
Mhm.
for everybody. And then you don't have to hide. You don't have to put things blocked, unavailable on your calendar. Parenting out loud is a fair day. Um, for men, for women, for LGBTQIA identified people, for anybody who has a family structure. We want to be able to parent out loud. And so I'm hoping that that's part of the political movement, is that it's not just the fair play, but it's the fair day that corporations recognize a 6-hour workday is plenty. Letting people leave to be adults and to have holistic lives will make them better, and better employees, make them they will be retained. That the flexibility is the conception, planning, execution. Letting people have the intrinsic motivation to finish their tasks and not be monitored on some scary spyware software. People
Right.
want to do good. I really believe that, in their jobs and in the world, and we have to allow them to be able to do that, as opposed to squashing every ounce of creativity and intrinsic motivation out of our employees.
Well,
And
and
I
I
believe
think we
that
have
ideal
to,
worker does that.
we have to ask our employees. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like so many employers miss the just asking your employee, what do you need? What do you want? What is a fair day to you? What is a great day to you? How can we make that happen? And I think it is so important just to have those conversations with our employees, and then create policies and office culture that allows employees to do what's right for each person, because it doesn't always look the same in your
No.
office.
No,
And
and that's that
people,
100%. Flexibility
yeah,
is in the eye of the beholder. It is different for everybody. Work from home is not the same thing as flexible work. I think so many people conflate
God,
the two. If your butt is still in a chair for 9 hours a day, it is not
totally.
flexible work, just because you're working from home. And so I
Right.
think, like you said, for me, it's a lot about flexibility and predictability, where people can feel psychologically safe to be able to predict their schedule, so
Yeah.
that they know when they can plan, because people really like to be able to plan. And I think that's why M&A attorneys, we burn out the fastest, because, and litigation is a little hard. It's hard too, but M&A is a really hard, because you can go from having nothing on your plate to a deal that ramps up that needs to close in 3 days. And it's so, I remember it being so stressful, we couldn't plan. So the more you can be predictable, the more you can be flexible. But like you said, Elise, ask, ask the
Yeah.
questions. What does a fair day look like to you?
Right.
How much more powerful is that as a question, as opposed to saying, it's July 1st, we're just get ready, we're all coming back to the office.
Right. Just, I don't understand what employers are thinking. I mean,
Thinking,
I've heard
literally,
more people and they're like, well, I don't want to go back. And I'm like, well, have you talked to your employer? And they're like, oh, well, that won't go over well. And I'm thinking, what does that
who are
mean?
you? Right? Who are you? And what century are you living in? Because I'm here to tell you, as an organizational management specialist, I get paid the big bucks, to work with family businesses and the ancillary businesses that are created by these
Right.
patriarchs who have built big companies, that the better functioning organizations are ones that have three things: explicitly defined expectations, fairness and transparency, and where you know your role. And so to get all those three things right, as you said, takes policies and practices, but it really takes knowing your workforce.
And constantly asking and
Right.
realizing
Checking
that if you
in.
asked once 6 months ago, that isn't necessarily the same answer today. And I mean, I find as an owner of a law firm, it is so important for me to be nuanced and nimble enough to be constantly seeking feedback from my team, so that we are really richly communicating, because there's no other way to make it work. And because I can't know what's going on in everybody's lives and what's changing if I'm not really tuned in. And to be tuned in, I have to ask, I have to be just really trying to get what's right for them, and realizing that it changes. I mean, life is complex. People are complex.
Yeah,
Families are
are
complex.
complex.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think what we're saying is invest in your employees the same way you've been investing in hand sanitizer
And toilet paper
and
at
toilet
the
paper.
beginning of this.
Yep, and toilet paper. Invest in your
Oh my
employees the way
gosh.
we're investing in toilet paper.
Oh, I cannot thank you enough for joining me today. I mean, it has just been such an honor to be able to talk to you and bring fair play to the Maximum Mom audience. And I encourage so many male attorneys who I know are, great dads. And I just know that this will be such an amazing conversation for all the attorneys in our Maximum Lawyer group. And so I really appreciate your time today so much.
So do I. And I'm telling you that I may have to impose on you and come back and to ask your son to do a tutorial for my middle son who's obsessed with restoring old cars as well. And so
Oh,
I want
absolutely.
to see, I would love to see what your son continues to do.
Oh yeah, well, it's great. When it moved the other day, it was pretty exciting. I mean, he got it off the stands and was able to actually drive it out. And I mean, my husband was just absolutely thrilled for him. He's like posting pictures everywhere, like the Porsche moved. It was really exciting. I mean, it's pretty cool to watch somebody be able to take a car, to nothing. It had nothing, and literally just build it up where it works. It's amazing, actually.
Well, like I said, your children are living in what I call unicorn space. And so I hope we can encourage everybody to do that.
Absolutely.
And
You
I'll
and I
come
are gonna
on
have
for
to,
that. I would love to come on for my
yes.
second book is launching and I finally get to announce it. That's announcing it's coming out in January 1st. So
Oh,
I
I'm
hope I
so
can join you
excited.
again.
Oh, I would love that. I've already pre-ordered your book. I mean,
Oh,
Unicorn
thank you.
Space.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to read that. I think I have this vision of unicorn space groups where
Oh my
women
God.
who have these interests they're pursuing and they can pursue them together as their unicorn space.
I love
Girl,
it.
we'll talk about that because I have so many things to say about your idea of unicorn space. I think it's amazing and it's what makes us interesting humans.
Absolutely. Well, I will come back on for that. I'm giving you a major big hug.
Absolutely. Well, you have a wonderful day.
You. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks
Okay,
again.
bye.
Bye.